They said the storm took everything, but they were wrong. It left one man tied to a tree, and one dog who refused to let him die. What came next wasn't just survival. It was the beginning of something that would change what we call loyalty forever. This is the North Star. Noah Rains, the survivor. Kira, the shepherd. Dr. Lila Chen, the analyst. Cole Hawkins, the broken mirror. Emily Vale, the witness. Alma Duarte, the judge of winter. Silas Marrow, the architect. Danny, the new generation. Agent Heller, the shadow between. Anna Rains, the lost star. The night made a sound like torn cloth. Wind shredded itself on the black pines, and the temperature had fallen so quickly the snow squeaked under boots. A sound Noah Rains would forever associate with the moment things went wrong. "Half a mile," he said into his throat mic, voice roughened by cold and old salt air. The HUD in his goggles flickered. Ash-blonde stubble showed silver in the reflected snowglow. His breath lifted as white as prayer. He raised a fist, and the four-man team halted in a crouch along the tree line. Far ahead, past a white meadow and a shoulder of rock, a single utility cabin hunched into the drift like something trying not to be seen. "Thermals?" he asked. "3 heat signatures, maybe 4. Hawkins whispered behind him. Jokes used to fall out of Hawkins like loose change. Not tonight. Not with the temperature knifing and the comms spitting static and the GPS freezing into a blue, useless brick. Noah scanned. The interior Alaska sky had the sickly green smear of a low aurora flattening the stars. Overhead, spruce tips ticked against the wind. Somewhere, a raven spoke like a lock clicking shut. "Same plan," Noah said. "Soft entry. No heroics." He didn't add what they all knew. The raid was supposed to be a quiet bite. Seize a ledger and a sat phone, roll up a small ring running mislabeled ore south. That was the story. It had taken him a full day of shoveling his way through procurement codes and logistics manifests to admit that the story had too many clean edges. Still, he'd trusted the op because that's what he did. He'd trusted because you can drown in second-guessing more surely than you drown in ice. They descended the slope, knees high in powder. The cold had settled inside Noah's gear, inside his bones, a slow ache that memory recognized from rescue swimmer days when the sea turned black and mean, and he dove in anyway. At the cabin's skirt, he saw it, a glint too neat at the baseboard where snow curled like frosting. "Freeze," he said. His forearm lifted. Hawkins' boot hung mid-air. Noah knelt, brushed snow back with a glove, and found the wire. Trip line, old school. Hawkins grunted. "Cute." Noah slid his multi-tool in, pinched, eased slack. His breath fogged his lenses. Over Hawkins' shoulder, the tree line became a line of blanks. No texture, no story, just dark. His skin prickled. He cut the wire, caught it before it could whisper back into the snow. "Go," he mouthed. They moved. 2 steps. The world split. The first shot came from the left, tight and close, a punch of orange in the wind. Bark spat from the log by Noah's ear. The second shot found someone. Noah didn't see who, only heard a sound that had no place in the cold. Wet, human, surprised. "Ambush!" Hawkins barked, and then the meadow was claws and light. Noah hit the snow, rolled behind a deadfall, returned 2 rounds toward muzzle flare. He saw figures in snow camo, fast and disciplined. Not the sloppy courier guards he'd built this plan for. He saw the cabin's window blink once with a handheld strobe, A signal, not a mistake. He saw the way the field of fire had been shaped to funnel them into a knot of drift and stump. Inside jobs don't look like movies. They look like this, a path salted before your boots ever touch it. South draw, Noah shouted. Break and smoke. But his throat mic coughed static. He popped a smoke canister anyway, watched its pale cloud shred in the wind without forming cover. A shot smacked his shoulder plate and spun him. He felt nothing. Cold had numbed that long ago. He crabbed right, legs churning, heart throwing slow, heavy beats that marked a body spending itself too fast. Something struck the base of his skull. There was no warning, only the old familiar flash. A camera bulb behind the eyes, and then the world skated sideways on a slick of black. He woke, tied to a cedar. When the cold gets that deep, time loses its verbs. The rope had cut through his gloves. He couldn't feel his hands. His head throbbed with his pulse, but he couldn't measure how long it had been because the wind had stolen the clock. The snow came in knives now, hard little blades that clicked against his cheekbones and worked their way down his collar like thieves. He tried the knot. It burned his wrist raw and did not move. He tried a prayer. It fogged the air and fell. He thought of the sea, the way, in worst weather, you learn to count by breath and beam, by any two steady things. He found two steady things, the cedar at his back and the way his chest still rose. Somewhere in the snow hiss, a different sound threaded through. Light, rhythmic, closer. Noah stilled. The shape came from the left, broke out of the pines like a shadow with breath, and pressed heat against his knees. A face lifted, sharp-eyed, one ear cropped, a white blaze like a comet on the muzzle. "Kira," he said. It came out a scrape. She whined low, a sound he could feel in his ribs, and then she went to work. Teeth on rope, paws digging for purchase, neck muscles cording. He remembered another winter, a river mouth choked with brash ice, a dog thrashing in the black. He'd gone over the rail without thinking. Later he'd told the report it was training, not impulse. People lie to paper so paper can lie back. The top strand parted. The knot sagged. Noah twisted his wrists, hissed, felt pins and needles light his forearms like sparks. Kira tugged again, jaw set. The last twist gave. The rope fell. Noah collapsed forward into the powder and sucked air like a drowning man. Kira pressed her body along his, a furnace made of muscle and will. He slid an arm around her shoulders, hid his face in her fur, and let his breath get small and regular again. "Good girl," he said into the ruff at her neck. Good girl." Headlights probed the trees beyond the meadow, white spears ghosting through trunks. Voices traveled with them, faint as radio static. Noah's heartbeat slowed to something usable. He put his mouth beside Kira's ear. Quiet. They crawled. The wind had carved a low, hard cave under a sastrugi ridge. Kira found it and shouldered her way inside first, then turned so the heat of her belly faced him. Snow and night muffled the world. Noah could hear his breath, her breath, the wire saw whisper of ice sifting in the entrance. He could also hear words that weren't sounds at all. Hawkins, Lena, names that rose and fell with the wind's pitch. He didn't chase them. Names can drown you. He dozed and woke and dozed again, each waking a different life. Once he heard footsteps outside the cave and tasted metal. Kira's growl came up from the floor of her chest like it had been carved there with a knife. The steps paused. A flashlight beam combed the drift and slid away. At dawn, the wind sank. The sky went the color of bone. Noah levered himself out of the cave, and Kira followed, snow crisping on her coat. The meadow held two sets of tracks, a patrol's wide stride and a smaller, quicker line that came from the trees, crossed the open, and ended at a cedar. At the foot of the tree, the rope lay like a shed skin. Noah stood over it a long time. The cold tried to argue. His shoulder throbbed arguments of its own. He let both voices speak and then chose a third voice, the one that said, "Move." They angled into the trees. Powder gave way to a packed lane where something heavy had passed after the storm, a sled or a truck with chained tires. Kira lowered her head and flowed along it, tail flagging when scent got strong. Noah followed, every step a negotiation with muscles that wanted to be done. The lane opened on a small clearing. A box truck, half buried in plow-thrown snow, hunched against a berm, its windshield starred with cracks. The hood steamed faintly as if the engine had only just died. Noah circled left, pistol low, breath controlled. No voices, no new tracks that weren't already filling with lazy drift. At the back, the cargo door had been pried but not opened. He eased it up. Hinges creaked like old bones. Inside, canvased crates strapped in rows, lozenges of frost on the canvas corners. A brittle chemical tang rode up out of the dark. He slit one canvas. Not guns, not food. Or dense black-green concentrates in sealed drums, each stamped with a lot code and a destination code that did not match any port he trusted. Rare earth, money you couldn't fold, money that drew men like Silas Marrow out of whatever hole they hibernate in between wars. On a crossbar above the load, something dangled on a lanyard. He reached up and palmed it. A sat phone, old model, scuffed, warm enough to suggest recent hand heat. He thumbed power. The screen came up to a login that scrolled a call sign he knew too well. Not a name. A label. DY22. His breath stopped. DY22 was not in any official tree he ever saw. DY22 lived in the margins of requisitions and the blank spaces of contracts, a honeycomb label that meant someone with keys moved something through doors no one admits exist. The snow behind him whispered. Kira's growl started as vibration. He pivoted and saw two men low in the trees, white parkas, black rifles, the easy way of shoulders that belonged to professionals. Noah didn't think. He dropped, rolled, fired twice into the drift at their feet. Snow popped. One man stumbled. Kira streaked past, a streak of comet white and darker fur, hit the nearer man in his thighs like a wrecking bar, and tore the rifle clear in one clean wrench. The second man froze at the sight instead of shooting. Training can't fix awe. "Talk," Noah said, sight on the center of the man's parka. The sat phone hung from his left hand like a weight he couldn't decide to keep or drop. "Who set our coordinates?" The man's eyes flicked to the truck, to the sat phone, to the wolfish dog now holding his partner to the snow with 70 pounds of purpose. "Orders," he said, accent flat, indecipherable. "We were told you'd be fertilizer by morning." "By who?" The man's mouth tipped in a small human smile, the first human thing about him. "By the man you're already chasing. We call him Marrow. You'll never touch bone." Noah made a choice then. He let the barrel drop a hair, not enough to invite a shot, just enough to invite a memory of every time he'd chosen the simple answer and found it led to a harder door. "Get out," he said. "Leave the rifles. Leave the truck. Walk north along your own tracks, and don't stop until your pride hurts." The man blinked at mercy like it stung worse than bullets. He nodded once, dropped the weapon, pulled his partner up by the parka, and they went. Two white shapes dissolving into white. Noah exhaled through his nose. The sat phone felt heavier. Kira sat, chest heaving, one paw lifted delicately from a cut he hadn't noticed. She looked up, eyes amber, steady as dawn. "Yeah," Noah said. "I see it too." DY-22, Silas Marrow, and a door he was already walking through. The lane of chained tire grooves bled into a stand of birch, their white trunks tattooed with windburn and old carvings. Noah moved inside the tree line, where the snow lay shallower, and the branches broke the wind into manageable teeth. Kira loped beside him, favoring the paw she'd lifted earlier, but refusing to let the limp become a rule. He pocketed the sat phone, slid a spare glove over it to keep the battery from dying in the cold, and kept the lanyard looped around his wrist. Old swimmer habit. Keep the thing that keeps you breathing tied to you. The trail kinked right and dropped toward a half-frozen river. The water ran black under a pressing skin of ice, breathing in slow fogs. He crouched at the bank and looked downstream. A low bridge, just treated logs strapped together with steel strap, spanned the narrow. Below the bridge, the ice had shattered where something heavy had gone through. Kira tested the edge and snorted, ears flicking. Noah smiled despite the ache that had set up house behind his eyes. "I hear you," he said. "That's how they hid the weight. Over the bridge, into the hole, let the water swallow." A raven ghosted overhead, gave a pronouncement that sounded like a courtroom cough. On the bridge, boot prints crossed and recrossed. 2 men, maybe 3, moving hurriedly. He leaned close. The right foot of one print had a chip in the heel, a tiny crescent. He filed it. Details are anchors. Across the river, the chain grooves resumed and led into willow scrub cut back by recent hands. Beyond that, a curl of smoke flattened against the sky. He checked the wind, tasted iron and something chemical, and went soft-footed through the brush. The truck waited inside a ring of plowed earth. Whoever parked it had tried to bury it in a drift, then thought better, then left in a hurry. Noah eased the cargo door higher and slid a second canvas on a crate. Same drums, same codes. He photographed everything, angles that would show context, details that would survive cross-examination. He had learned a truth no one teaches. If you want a thing to be believed later, respect it now. Kira sniffed the inner wall, then stretched and pawed high. Her claws scraped an area where frost scabbed thicker, like the metal had colder bones. Noah pressed his palm there, felt an emptiness behind the skin, hollow. He probed with the knife. The panel gave, revealing a cavity. Inside lay a ledger book vacuum-packed in plastic, the edges taped over and sealed with a contractor's tamper strip. The strip read, Northern Interior Logistics. Property. Void if removed. Northern Interior Logistics was the polite face Marrow wore when he needed a bank account and a handshake. Noah had seen the logo in procurement stacks. A blue mountain, with a road cutting its shoulder like a scar. He slipped the ledger into his pack and turned to Kira. "We found their heartbeat." A distant engine wound up, thin but rising like a saw singing. Not close. Not far. He checked the sat phone. The login screen pulsed a prompt. Enter route token. He thumbed the soft keys. No maps, no contacts, no sentiment. Just a string of numbers he didn't have. "Fine," he said. "We do it the slow way." The approach road came in from the east. He stayed off it and ghosted the tree line parallel. Kira kept her chin just above the snow, tasting the world. Within minutes, the trees thinned, and the world opened into a scrapyard turned staging area. Old graders, blue plastic barrels tied in neat pyramids, a prefab office on skids with a door that sat a little too square for something that had been dragged over Muskeg. He lay behind a snow berm and watched. Two men in parkas smoked near the office ramp, hands bare, cigarettes acting as hand warmers and tiny lighthouses. One of them had the crescent chip in his heel. The other's parka was new enough to squeak. A third man, tall, wire-lean, moved between the barrels checking straps. He did not look like he belonged in the cold. Some people wear winter, some endure it like a grudge. The tall man's phone chirped. He stepped into the lee of the office and answered. "Green by nightfall. Marrow wants—" The wind ate the rest and delivered a different gift, the squeak parka man saying, "Supposed to be a ghost out there. DHS boy tied to a tree, back from the dead." The tall man smiled with half his mouth. "Ghosts don't bleed. We saw the prints." Noah filed the angle of the smile, the cadence. It had the training ground's boredom. He felt the old impulse to solve it now, to reach into the scene and snatch the thread. But any rescue swimmer will tell you, the first rule of drowning is that the panicked person will take you with them. Patience is also a throw line. He retreated a length, set a camera on a dead stump, framed a shot that watched the office door and the barrels both, and left it to keep its small, honest record. Then he circled wide to the prefab's rear. A generator thrummed inside a plywood box. He cracked the box just enough to reach the choke and starve the engine. The generator coughed, sputtered, whispered itself asleep. Inside the office, voices rose in irritation, chairs scraped, boots thumped. The tall man came out first to kick the box, then bent to pull the hatch open. Noah ghosted the gap, slid inside, and shut the office door before the wind could snitch. The prefab smelled like coffee burned into tin and paper dust. A corkboard wore printouts of manifests, delivery windows, and a north-south map with hand-drawn arrows like migrating geese. The desk held a second sat phone with the same login pulse and a laptop locked behind a screensaver that tossed up Northern Interior's logo every 60 seconds, as if to guard against loneliness. He moved to the file drawer. The key hung from a string thumb-tacked under the desk, lazy security often being the most realistic kind. He turned the lock and found a box of tamper strips, blank, contracts, and a sheet of root tokens stapled at random intervals. Root tokens. He photographed the sheet, then slid it back and closed the drawer, leaving the key where it had been. The screensaver showed a time in the corner, 11:06. He had maybe 4 minutes before someone with authority would do an angry walkthrough. He keyed the sat phone and entered a token at random. The screen cleared to a bare-bones menu. Queue, messages, roots, erase. He opened messages. A small grid of times with one letter each populated the screen like a code that didn't trust itself. He highlighted the latest and hit open. It was not content. It was a pointer, a hash referencing something that lived elsewhere. DY22 anchor bear, 2 words with more than one meaning in Alaska. 2 words with enough romance to look like nothing serious to a casual eye. He backed out, hit roots, and saw a cut-down list. Birch Point, Eel Bank, Bear Anchor, Cougar Step. He took photos of each screen. He hit erase, not to purge, but to see the warning. It flashed, requires master key. Good. Someone had built at least one fence. The door rattled. He slid the sat phone back to the exact angle and length of cord he'd found it, then stepped to the corkboard, as if he belonged there, and clipped a random paper into a file he could plausibly hold. When the tall man pushed in, Noah let the door open into his shoulder and said, annoyed, "If the generator's going to die every time the wind sneezes, maybe we keep a space heater that's not older than I am." The tall man took him in. DHS jacket under frost, goggles up, the confidence you wear when you expect to be obeyed. "Who the hell?" Noah flipped his badge open and showed him a face that looked a lot like his from 3 years ago, because it was. He hadn't worn the badge in months, but bureaucracy is an unintentional archivist. Liability inspection, Noah said. Your contractor of record is Northern Interior. They've been flagged for workplace exposure complaints. I need your lockout procedures for the drums, and I need to see your eyewash station. The tall man's eyes did a thing like a door almost closing. He didn't buy it, not completely, but he didn't not buy it either, and the cold wanted this conversation to be over. We don't have an eyewash. Write that down, Noah said, holding up a blank form he had just extracted from thin air and nerve. Also, where's your spill kit, and who signed for this week's drum transfer? He watched the man flinch at signed. Paper fears paper. Merrow's office has all that, the man said. In town. Anchor? Noah asked, like a man clicking puzzle pieces he'd been given. Anchor, the man said. Warehouse by the old shipyard. Noah nodded like that was the answer he expected. He wrote Anchor, warehouse, on the top of the blank form and underlined it twice to give the moment a sense of completed ritual. Someone will come by to tag any safety deficiencies. In the meantime, keep the generator lid closed. You're sucking snow. The man grunted, already bored again, already thinking about coffee. Noah left into the wind. At the generator box, he dragged his glove across the hatch in a way that made the smear match the tall man's boot scuffs. He circled, collected his camera, and found Kira posted under the grater, eyes on the smokers. Let's go find Anchor, he said. They ghosted back through willow and birch, crossed the bridge where the river breathed fog in steady lungs, and climbed the slope toward the track that would take them to the highway if they needed it, and to the old weather outpost if they turned left at the Y. Noah turned left. By the time the outpost's dish rose out of the trees like a dead moonflower, the light had gone flat. The cinderblock building wore ice-like armor. The door had a keypad smeared with mint soot and a bolt that could stop memory. He keyed in a code that had opened 100 similar doors, 24628. It beeped its disapproval, then, perhaps seduced by the distant power of shared government ancestry, chirped green on the second try, 1357. Inside was old coffee, equipment hum and survival, blankets stacked, a whiteboard with yesterday's wind chill numbers, a bulletin tacked with a single note in neat hand. If you're cold, the radio is colder. Be kind. Kira shook snow out of her coat and stamped her paws like a small horse. Noah wiped the lanyard of the sat phone dry and set about waking the uplink. Sat dish, narrowband amplifier, the little modem that talked to the sky like a supplicant. Static came first, like a choir clearing throats. He leaned into the mic. Base, this is Rain's DHS field. Authentication to follow. Need secure pipe. Silence, then a carrier tone that felt like hope. Rains? A woman's voice said, professional warmth under tension. If this is a joke, it's in poor taste. He smiled. That voice had walked him through worse code than this cold. Lila. A pause. When she came back, the professional veneer had cracked and something human had leaked out. You're supposed to be dead. Working on the opposite, he said. I have a ledger, a sat phone locked to tokens referencing DY22, and a staging yard pointing toward an Anchor warehouse. I need you to pull northern routing on Northern Interior and give me an address that isn't on Google's postcards. Kira lifted her head at the name Lila and wagged once, a secret only the three of them knew. On the line, keys rattled like rain. Then Lila exhaled through her nose in a way that said she'd found a thing that confirmed the shape of her worst theory. I've got an Anchor Bay address, she said. Bear Street, no signage. Leases through a stack of LLCs that loop back to a defense contractor's holding arm. Noah. He waited. I think DY22 isn't a code name. I think it's a carve-out. He knew the word. It lived in corners where tax law shakes hands with war. A carve-out lets something be both outside and owned, disavowed and defended. Send the coordinates, he said. Working on it, she said. Also, your op file is changed. Someone edited the raid after action 3 hours ago. Your team's KIA listed. You're not on the roster. Ghost, he said. Yeah, she said softly. Ghost. Static blossomed. The carrier thinned. Lila's voice pinched. They're jamming. Meet me where the radio can't be killed by a battery in a backpack, he said. The outpost. On my way. He killed the uplink, shut the room down to low hum, and sat with his back to the block wall. Kira pushed her shoulder into his boot and sighed. Bear Street, he said to the ceiling. Anchor. DY22. And Lila. Outside, the river remembered its old route under a winter it didn't believe would ever end. He believed in rivers. They take the long way, but they always arrive. By the time the sky lost even the pretense of blue, the wind had filed the drifts into glacial ribs. Lila Chen arrived wrapped in a navy parka that made her look like a walking midnight. Goggles reflecting the outpost door and insect facets. She hugged Noah without asking if he was huggable, then held him at arm's length to inventory the bruises life had left on his face. 2 things, she said. 1, you look like a rumor. 2, I brought cinnamon buns. Kira made a churro noise of appreciation. Lila dropped to a knee, let the Malinois sniff her gloves, then offered the back of her hand to be accepted into the society of the living. Hi, hero, she whispered. Kira leaned and gifted her a sigh. They ate sweetness with bare fingers and let their bodies briefly remember there were other uses for hands than fighting and typing. Then the work pulled them back. The way a tide pretends to be still and then reminds you who it is. Lila rolled her kit out on the desk, a tough book, a travel router, a tiny Faraday pouch. You weren't kidding about DY22, she said, opening windows like doors. I've been shadowing money with no source and outcomes, with no signature for 6 months. Every breadcrumb led to a blank line labeled with that honeycomb. It's a side pocket. Partnership between a contractor's foreign supply wing and a sliver of government that pretends to be dead so it can cheat at chess. Silas Marrow? Noah asked. He's the hands, she said. The pocket belongs to someone who wears suits to ghost stories. She reached for the sat phone. May I? He slid it over. She breathed on her fingers, flexed them, and then worked the soft keys like she was asking the device to dance. Route tokens look random, but they're spaced like a metronome, she murmured. If the person who typed these was scared, their fear had rhythm. Kira settled with her chin on Noah's boot. The outpost hummed. The dish outside scanned the sky that kept pretending it didn't know them. Okay, Lila said. Here's your route list. Bear Anchor is a pseudo-location. It maps to a warehouse grid 2 blocks off Bear Street. The pointer in your messages, Angkor Bear, likely references a crate tag or a package-ready flag. And look here. She tapped a corner of the screen. The queue has a dead message injected as noise, but if you peel away the null bytes, she did. A string unfolded, Frost bind 2310, Angkor Bay, door 4, blue lift. Door 4, Noah said. Blue lift. And 2310, Lila added, tonight. A thump sounded on the roof. Not wind, not snow. Something heavier than weather. They looked at each other. Old drills woke in their shoulders. Lila killed the screen with a hand flat as a blessing. Noah took 2 steps and clicked the overhead fluorescents dead. The room went to dim instrument glow. He moved to the door and set the latch, then put his palm on the concrete wall and felt the vibration through old cement and new stories. Kira's ears slid forward. The low sound in her chest turned into a statement. "Generator box?" Lila breathed. He shook his head. Thumps moved from roof to ground. Footfalls. 2, 3, maybe 4. A voice under a hat brim muttered something that contained a laugh. They had options. None were excellent. The outpost had rear access through a half-buried service hatch that opened into waist-deep snow. There was the dish shaft if you wanted to fall to your death, quietly. There was the front door and the truth that sometimes forward is the only direction you can walk honestly. Noah pointed Lila to the service hatch and put one finger to his lips. She shook her head. "You go," she mouthed. He shook his. Kira cocked her head like a referee tired of athletes lying about fouls. The doorknob ticked, not a rattle, a confident test. Then a key slid in and turned as if it had done so yesterday. The door opened 6 inches and paused against the chain. A black-gloved hand reached in to lift the chain, felt it, and withdrew. "Rains," a voice said. The accent wore anchorage like an old coat. "If you're in there, come out. If you make me come in, I'll owe you a hospital visit." Noah breathed once, twice. He unlocked the chain, stood behind the door, and let it swing open. The wind reached inside and pawed at the papers. 4 shapes edged around the threshold, backs to the room. Weapons hung low like they belonged there. Deputies in winter kit, county patch exhausted by wash and time. The lead deputy took in Kira first, then Noah's face, then the SAT gear. He lowered his rifle a centimeter. "Ward said you might be here," he said. Noah blinked. "Ethan Ward?" The deputy nodded once, a heavy, meaningful thing. "Said to tell you the ridge paid for what the river owed. I don't speak poet. I'm just doing the errand. He also said you're either the solution or the story on the evening news." A laugh rose in Noah's throat like a bubble and died there. Ethan Ward had taught him to read snow when he'd first been sent north to assist people who lived here. Ethan had also taught him that most people didn't need assisting. They needed someone to walk beside them without explaining the ground to them. "Where is he?" Noah asked. The deputy's eyes moved away and came back with a truth they hadn't wanted to carry. "Holding a ridge," he said simply. "Bought you an hour." He glanced at Lila. "You must be the doctor." "Of what depends on the day," she said, voice thin with a grief she'd filed away and just found again. "Either way," the deputy said. "We've got trucks coming up from Bear Street. Someone doesn't like the sauce you're making. If you have to move, do it now. If you're staying, you'll want the lights out and the back door dug." Noah looked at Lila. She rolled her shoulders and answered the question he hadn't voiced. "Door 4 still. Happens at 2310, whether we're there or not." He nodded. He thought of Hawkins and Lena and the tripwire and the old cedar. He thought of the sat phone's lanyard and the way Kira had set her body inside his cold to make it smaller. He looked at the deputy. "We dig." They worked with shovels that had been leaning by the hatch since the day someone decided to put this outpost where radios could see the sky. Snow yielded in grudging slabs. Kira took a turn by simply being a furnace in a small space. By the time the hatch was viable, truck lights had stitched the far tree line with coming. The deputy posted one of his men with a long gun by the dish shadow, another by the generator box, and kept the 4th to watch the door with him. "If they're professionals," he said, "they won't spray. They'll push, Find weak lumber and pry. Good, Noah said. We're concrete and patience. Lila tapped the sat phone, coaxed one more message from it, something buried deep in a dead sector. She decrypted, frowned, and turned the screen. DY22. Ward, receipt scrolled, then a text block like a confession. Ethan's name, dates and coordinates, a ledger of small betrayals that added up to an avalanche. But at the bottom, a transfer out, data packets sent to a single recipient over months, each tagged with a checksum that matched Lila's private relay. He was talking to you, Noah said. He was trying, Lila answered, mouth tight. And someone was trying to make that look like treason. The trucks idled outside like animals catching breath. A bullhorn barked a name that wasn't Noah's, and then the same voice tried on reins, like it was a poorly fitted coat. We have a warrant, it lied. We have heaters, it added, more honestly. The deputy grinned without humor. They always bring heaters to the Cold War. The first pry bar wedged between door and jamb. Noah let the metal sing in his bones, counted beats. On 2, he nodded to Lila. She slipped through the hatch with Kira at her heels. On 3, he slung his pack and handed the sat phone to the deputy. If I don't come back, give this to the woman who'll walk in here asking for it with no badge and better eyes than mine. He scribbled a name on the back of the cinnamon bun wrapper and tucked it into the deputy's glove. Copy, the man said. You're coming back, Lila hissed from below. Door 4, he reminded her. Blue lift. Her eyes said things the rules of their work had never let them say. Then she disappeared into the white. The pry bar squealed victory. The door opened a crack wide enough for a human lie to slip through. Then a boot. The deputy met the boot with the door, and the door with his shoulder. Someone outside swore in a language that wore the cold better than English. Noah stepped into the dish shadow and listened until the rhythm of the men outside matched his own lungs. Then he moved, low and right, past the generator, along the wall, into the trees. The trucks were pointed south, warm noses steaming, drivers idling heaters, a little lazy the way humans get when the night is long and the orders are stupid. He slid under the last truck, belly to cold, and peered up into the engine's glowing, miserable heart. He pulled a small cutter from his pocket and nicked a wire where the loom already looked tired. When the driver finally revved to move, the truck would cough and die in a way that felt like an old problem, not sabotage. He did the second truck the same, then ghosted deeper into the trees, letting his tracks cross and double and fade. He found the service hatch mouth by listening for Lila's breath in a quiet too loud with men and engines. She caught his hand and pulled him down into the black. Door 4? She whispered. Blue lift? He said. Behind them, the outpost door finally surrendered. Boots and breath, and the arrogance of men who believed paperwork made them right, spilled into the room. The deputy's voice greeted them with a badge number and a name, and the kind of hospitality that meant, you might win, but you will not feel unopposed. Noah and Lila moved like a river under ice, following a crawl space to the tree line, then rising into night that smelled like diesel and old snow. Anchorage waited to the south, a low halo of sodium lamp and ship horns and choices. They turned toward it, breath in white ropes. Time, like the cold, would not be negotiable. By dawn, the outpost behind them was only a rumor swallowed by snow. Noah and Lila followed the service road west, the world around them reduced to white breath and the metronome of boots crunching ice. Kira scouted ahead, a blur of tan against the fog that thickened until distance stopped existing. They didn't talk much, Words carried too far in air like this, frozen and thin enough to hold secrets forever. At the ridgeline, Noah raised a fist. Lila froze, breath hitching behind her mask. He crouched and brushed aside a crust of snow to reveal tire tracks. Fresh, maybe half an hour old. Bear Street runs that way, he said quietly. They're moving crates early. Lila checked her tablet, tapping through a SAT overlay that struggled for signal. Anchorage grid traffic shows nothing. These trucks aren't registered. Then we're in front of the story, Noah said. Good. They descended into a canyon where the fog ran like milk poured over slate. The air carried the hush that only comes before violence. Kira halted suddenly, one paw lifted, ears carving the silence. Then, footsteps. Faint, steady, circling. Noah slid behind a boulder and signaled Lila down. Shapes drifted through the white. 2 men in contractor grays, rifles slung casual, masks up. They weren't searching. They were guarding. He pointed left. Lila nodded. Together they flanked low and slow until the fog swallowed all direction. Then Kira tensed, muscles coiling. The first man passed within 5 meters. Kira leapt. The sound was soft. A thud, a breath, snow falling from branches. The second man spun, firing blind. The round split the air beside Noah's cheek. He tackled the shooter, both rolling through powder until gravity remembered itself. When silence came back, it came too easily. Lila crouched over the bodies, checking insignia. Private security, not DHS, not locals. She looked up. We're ghosts fighting ghosts. Noah searched the first man's pack. Inside, a tablet wrapped in thermal cloth and a stack of laminated route slips marked with contractor seals. The top one read, Anchor Bay, Blue Lift, 2310. That's tonight, Lila said. It's still happening. He nodded. Then we crashed their midnight mass. They climbed higher to get signal. The fog tore itself open in sudden gusts, showing a skeletal radio tower ahead, half collapsed, cables hanging like ribs. Noah scanned the horizon, dark smudge of highway, far-off orange pulse of Anchorage. Civilization pretending not to notice its ghosts. He keyed the sat phone, hoping for Lila's network. Static. Then, Rains. This is Base 2. You need to move. They've issued a ghost protocol, kill verification in the field. The voice wasn't Lila's. It was Ward's deputy. Noah's pulse ticked once, then went still. Copy that. Any friendlies? Few, but you've got watchers on every grid. Someone's burning names. The transmission. Cut. Lila watched him. We just got promoted from missing to inconvenient. Then we stay inconvenient, he said. They reached the tower's base. Noah found a maintenance hatch and forced it open. Inside, dry cables, frozen dust, a field kit stashed long ago, batteries, flares, a worn photo of a man and a child taped to the panel. Humanity leaves fingerprints in every apocalypse. He pocketed a flare. We'll need light where we're going. Kira barked once, sharp, warning. Footsteps again, this time heavier. Engines idling somewhere below. Lila slung her pack. We can't outrun trucks in this fog. No, Noah said, but we can make the fog theirs. They dragged the fallen guards' flares into the drift and cracked them one by one. Red smoke poured out, thick and alive, mixing with the ice fog until color became confusion. Noah moved through it like it was choreography he'd practiced all his life. Steps, breath, pause, wait. Engines revved below, lights slicing red clouds into pieces, shouts in 2 radios overlapped, panic painted in human tones. When it was over, only silence and the smell of burned magnesium remained. Lila touched Noah's arm. That wasn't war, she said softly. That was erasure. He didn't argue. He just looked toward the dark outline of the city below them. Then let's make sure something stays written. They turned their backs on the ruined tower. The flare still hissed behind them, its glow swallowed slowly by the snow. Ahead waited Bear Street. Door 4, the blue lift, and whatever truth was buried beneath DY-22. The mountains of Eagle Hollow had many mouths, but only one ever breathed. Locals called it the Mine's Mouth, a collapsed shaft from the Cold War era, sealed after a cave-in, buried under decades of ice and rumor. To Noah Raines, it was just another coordinate on a map. To Kira, it was a scent, metal, oil, and something ancient. They reached the site by dusk. The sky bruised purple, bleeding light through layers of fog. Snow powdered everything, the boulders, the rusted warning signs, the bent chain-link gate. Lila exhaled, her breath a ghost in the twilight. "This is where the blue lift routes converge," she said, holding her tablet toward the entrance. "Every signal ends here." Noah stepped closer, running a gloved hand along the metal frame of the gate. "Feels like a heartbeat." The hum was faint, but real. Some low-frequency vibration pulsing under the ground, too steady to be wind. He crouched, brushed away snow, and revealed a row of tire tracks circling the shaft entrance. Fresh again. "They're still using this place," Lila whispered. Kira barked once, low, uncertain. Her breath formed a halo in the cold air. The dog's ears pressed back, her instincts faster than their analysis. "Okay," Noah murmured, checking his weapon. "We go quiet from here." The mine's tunnel swallowed their light whole. Each beam from their flashlights dissolved into the black like ink into water. Rusted rails ran down into darkness, glistening faintly under frost. The air carried that hollow metallic taste that comes from air trapped too long underground. They moved slow, careful. Kira led, nose to the ground. Every step echoed like memory. Halfway down the main tunnel, Noah froze. On the wall to their right, painted in faded red, DY-22. He traced the letters with a finger. The paint flaked, old, but not ancient. "You said this code showed up in the manifests," he whispered. Lila nodded. Dynetech, Project 22. They were researching AI-linked logistics for NATO convoys, supposedly shut down 5 years ago. Supposedly. They pushed deeper. The tunnel forked left and right. Kira growled softly toward the left branch. Noah followed her gaze. Faint blue light flickered from somewhere ahead. Lila pulled her pistol. "If someone's here, then we find out why," Noah finished. The corridor opened into a massive chamber. Rows of metal crates sat half-buried in frost, each stamped with the same insignia, Dynetech Systems, restricted. The air hummed with residual energy. In the center, a generator thrummed weakly, powered by cables running deeper into the shaft. Lila's voice trembled. "This isn't abandoned. Someone's keeping this place alive." Noah approached a control console. Dust covered everything except the keyboard. He brushed it aside and tapped a few keys. The screen flickered, displaying a single encrypted prompt. "Access node 22, biometrics required." He frowned. "They're gating, entry by DNA." "Military protocol?" "No," he murmured. "Personal." He reached into his vest pocket, pulling out a tiny metal vial sealed with frost. Inside was a blood sample, his own, a relic from his time in the service, stored for field clearance. He slid it into the console port. The monitor blinked. Identity, Raines, Noah J. Access level 3 confirmed. Lila's eyes widened. "You were cleared for this?" "I shouldn't be." The generator's hum deepened. Doors along the far wall hissed open, releasing a stale gust of air. Beyond them lay a narrow corridor lined with sealed pods. Inside each, faint silhouettes, humanoid, unmoving. Lila stepped forward, whispering, "Oh God." Each pod held a K9 unit, cybernetic implants along their spines, metal plates under fur now frozen stiff. Some pods were empty. Some had glass shattered outward. Noah's throat tightened. Project Shepherd. What? It was rumored after Fallujah. Experimental AI handlers. Dogs bonded to field agents through neural feedback chips. They said it failed. The animals broke. He looked down at Kira, who stood rigid, eyes locked on the nearest pod. Her body trembled. Not fear, but memory. Lila whispered, "You think she's one of them?" Before Noah could answer, the tunnel lights flickered. A harsh, mechanical voice filled the chamber. Unauthorized access detected. Purge protocol initiated. The door behind them slammed shut. Red lights ignited overhead. The generator screamed. "Move!" Noah shouted. They sprinted down the corridor as sirens echoed like gunfire. Steam erupted from the vents, the air turning into molten frost. Kira led the way, muscles coiled, instincts unshakable. At the far end, an emergency ladder climbed toward the surface. Noah shoved Lila upward first, then followed, his shoulder protesting every movement. Below, the pods cracked one by one, glass shattering, claws scraping metal. Something alive was waking. He looked down once and froze. From the last pod, a dog identical to Kira stepped out. Same color, same build, same scar on the leg. But its eyes glowed electric blue. Kira barked furiously, the sound echoing like defiance. The other creature tilted its head, almost curious. Then it lunged. Noah climbed faster, pulling Kira by the harness. The ladder groaned under his weight. A clawed paw slashed upward, scraping his boot. He swung his rifle, fired down once. Steel rang, sparks flew. Then they broke into air and snow again. The hatch blew open behind them as the pressure equalized. A plume of white smoke followed, the sound of distant howls echoing from below. Lila gasped for breath. What was that? Noah didn't answer right away. He just looked at Kira, who stood panting beside him, blood on her muzzle, eyes wide. That, he said softly, was her shadow. They retreated to a frozen ridge a mile from the mine. From there, they could see faint light flickering within the collapsed shaft, like a heartbeat under the ice. Lila wrapped her coat tighter. If they cloned K9s from the Shepherd Project, then someone rebuilt the bond, Noah finished. And if they're running Blue Lift shipments, that means they're moving something they can't track with human hands. He sat on a rock, rubbing Kira's neck. The dog leaned into him, trembling. She remembers, he murmured. Whatever they did down there, it's in her blood. Lila sat beside him. You said once you didn't believe in miracles. He smiled faintly. I lied. They watched the mine's light fade until only the stars remained. The wind carried the faintest echo of metallic barking, machine, memory, or both. In the darkness, Kira pressed closer, resting her head against Noah's leg. For the first time since the ambush, he didn't feel alone. Somewhere deep beneath them, the other K9's eyes still glowed, waiting. The sun over Alaska didn't rise so much as it bled into the sky, a pale wound leaking light through ice fog. By the time Noah, Lila, and Kira reached the ridge overlooking the highway, the horizon had gone gold and white and cruel. The road to Anchorage's industrial quarter curved through the valley like a scar. Trucks moved below, small as beetles, their diesel fumes turning into ribbons of smoke that drifted up toward the ridge. Each one was tagged with the Northern Interior Logistics logo, the same mountain scar as on the crates in the mine. Same supply chain, Lila murmured, adjusting her binoculars. Same ghost signatures. Noah crouched beside her, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. His breath came out like fog against the cold. "Let's make sure they're not moving anything we can't unsee." Kira whined softly, tail low. The dog's fur was stiff with frost, but her eyes burned clear amber. Noah reached out and brushed snow from her neck. "She knows something's wrong," he said quietly. "She's smarter than both of us combined," Lila replied. They watched the convoy for several minutes before Lila spoke again. "There's a pattern," she said, pointing. "Every third truck, no registration, no heat trace from the driver's cab. They're automated, self-driving, running on internal code. Which means someone doesn't want human eyes on what's inside." Noah's jaw tightened. "Then we follow." They tailed the convoy from a distance, snow chains crunching under the truck's rhythm. The air temperature dropped another 5 degrees, turning breath into crystal. The road narrowed until the convoy peeled off toward an abandoned industrial park. Rusted cranes, silent warehouses, and the smell of oil frozen in time. Lila checked the tablet again. "This is Bear Street," she said. "And there, door 4, blue lift." The warehouse sat squat and wide at the end of the lot, its loading bay light flickering weakly. A half-buried sign read, "Anchor Bay Storage. Authorized personnel only." Kira's hackles rose. Noah felt it through her leash before he even saw movement. A guard tower near the east corner, 2 figures silhouetted against the dying light. "2 on watch," he whispered. "We move when the wind shifts." They waited. The wind came like a gift, sharp, loud, covering sound. Noah and Lila sprinted low across the open ground. Snow kicked up behind them in silver plumes. Kira bounded ahead, muscles smooth and silent. At the loading bay, Noah found the keypad crusted with ice. He blew warm air on it and scraped with his glove until the numbers showed. "Same pattern," he murmured. 2468. The light blinked red, then green. "Déjà vu," Lila said. They slipped inside. The warehouse interior was a cathedral of shadows. Pallets of crates stretched into the dark, each marked with numbers that made no sense until you saw the rhythm in them. An encryption disguised as inventory. The hum of generators vibrated underfoot. Kira moved ahead, nose twitching, paws barely making sound. She stopped near one stack of crates and let out a single low growl. Noah knelt beside her, pried open the lid of the nearest crate. Inside wasn't ore or weapon parts, it was paper. Thousands of sheets stacked and sealed in plastic. Lila pulled one out. Her gloved fingers shook. They weren't manifests. They were names, pages and pages of them. Soldiers, agents, contractors. Every line ended with a status code, MIA, KIA, or redirected. And at the bottom of the last page, Rains, Noah J. Status, terminated. Asset redeployed, DY22. Lila swallowed. Redeployed? Noah stared at the word until it stopped making sense. "They didn't kill us," he said slowly. "They recycled us." He reached deeper into the crate. Beneath the pages lay a metal device the size of a shoebox, smooth, black, humming faintly. A Dynetech tag gleamed on its side. Neural Interface Unit, Prototype 3B. "This is what they put in the shepherd dogs," he whispered. This links mind to command net." Lila's voice dropped to a whisper. "Noah, are you saying DY22 isn't just a project?" He nodded. "It's a collection. People, dogs, machines, anything loyal that could be programmed to obey." Kira whined, stepping back from the crate. Her body trembled. Noah reached to steady her, and then her head snapped up. A sound, soft, metallic, footsteps. He looked toward the far end of the warehouse. A figure emerged from the dark. Tall, calm, familiar. Noah froze. "No." The man wore an Arctic parka, hood down. His face was pale, cut with the same lines Noah remembered from a lifetime ago. Cole Hawkins, Noah breathed. Lila gasped. Your teammate? He died in the ambush. Hawkins smiled faintly, as if the word died were a polite exaggeration. That's what they told you. Hawkins stepped closer, boots crunching frost. His eyes gleamed, wrong somehow. Not glassy, not human exactly, but lit from within like the canine clones. They rebuilt me, he said softly. And I remembered everything. The cold, the tree, your voice on the radio saying you'd come back for us. Noah's voice cracked. What did they do to you? They made me efficient, Hawkins said. You should have seen the test runs, Noah. We don't break anymore. We don't question orders. We don't freeze. You're not you. Hawkins's smile faltered for a second, then steadied again. Maybe not, but you shouldn't have come here. Marrow knows. He's watching right now. Lila lifted her pistol. Tell him we're done running. Hawkins didn't move. His gaze shifted to Kira. She was meant to be decommissioned. You kept her alive. Noah stepped between them. You touch her, and we find out how efficient you really are. A faint laugh escaped Hawkins. Still the same, brother. He dropped a small object onto the floor. It clattered once, then began to beep. Noah didn't think. He grabbed Lila and threw her behind the nearest crate. Kira dove with them. The grenade went off in a flash of blue light, not an explosion, an electromagnetic pulse. The lights died, the generators coughed, every screen went black. Noah's vision swam. His ears rang. Somewhere in the dark, Hawkins' voice echoed, distorted and broken. They'll find you. The frost remembers its names. Then silence. When Noah's sight cleared, Hawkins was gone. Only his footprints remained, glowing faintly blue under residual static. Lila's voice came shakily. EMP, we're blind. Not blind, Noah said. Just forced to remember. He fumbled in his pack, pulled out a flare, and struck it. Red light flooded the space, painting the walls with trembling shadows. The names in the papers shimmered under the light. Thousands of souls caught between truth and deletion. Lila whispered, We have to get this out. This is proof. Noah nodded, jaw set. We'll burn the snow if we have to. They made it out through a side door, the cold biting like teeth. The sky had turned to iron. Snow began to fall again, slow, deliberate, as if the world itself were erasing what had happened. At the edge of the lot, Noah turned back once. The warehouse loomed behind them, its windows glowing faintly with residual blue light. Cole's alive, he said quietly. No, Lila said. Something wearing him is. He didn't argue. He couldn't. Kira pressed close to his leg, head low, her breath ragged. When Noah knelt beside her, she looked up at him with eyes full of pain and memory. She knew him, Noah said softly. She recognized his scent. Lila put a hand on his shoulder. Then he's not completely gone. Maybe that's how we reach him. Maybe, Noah said, but not tonight. They turned toward the horizon where the city lights bled faint gold through the storm. Their tracks stretched behind them, already fading. Hours later, they made camp in the ruins of a ranger's cabin. The walls were half collapsed, the roof sagging, but the fireplace still worked. Lila sat near the flames, warming her hands. Noah leaned against the wall, staring at the flicker through Kira's fur. Shepherd, redeploy, DY-22. He said the words like puzzle pieces. They made us parts in something bigger. Lila looked at him. Then we take it apart. Noah nodded slowly. Tomorrow we start with Marrow. Kira shifted in her sleep, paws twitching. Her tail thumped once, twice, like a heartbeat. or a signal from somewhere deep under the frost. Outside, the snow fell quietly, the kind of snow that covers blood, but never the truth. Anchorage wore stormlight like an old bruise. By late afternoon, the sky had sunk to a low pewter lid, and the city's edges blurred under blowing snow. The federal courthouse stood on its hill of concrete and conviction, windows lit in rows like teeth. Noah, Lila, and Kira moved against the wind across the plaza, a trinity of breath and purpose. "Chain of custody," Lila said, patting the flat Pelican case under her parka. "Ledger scans, the neural interface unit, route tokens, warehouse photos. It's enough to punch daylight through DY-22. Daylight helps," Noah said, "but storms make their own rules." Kira ranged a half step ahead, reading the crowd, the security guards hunched against cold, a knot of protesters with handmade signs, a news van shouldering into a drift. As they reached the metal detectors, a marshal glanced down and lifted a brow at the dog. "She's service," Noah said, "and smarter than most counsel." The marshal huffed something like a laugh and waved them through. Inside, heat peeled the ice from their coats in glittering flakes. Fluorescent light washed the corridors, as if truth were a surface you could sterilize. Lila guided Noah to an office on the second floor with a glass door that read, "Assistant U.S. Attorney, Alma Duarte." Through the glass, a woman with steel gray hair and a posture that wouldn't bend for God or gravity was scribbling on a legal pad. Duarte didn't look up when they entered. "If you're selling miracles," she said, "you're late." "Evidence," Leela replied, sliding the case onto the desk. "And a problem wearing a contractor's face." Duarte capped her pen and finally looked. Her eyes were sharp enough to nick. "Dr. Chen, Mr. Rains." She nodded at Kira. "And the witness I'm most likely to believe." Noah cracked the case, laid out the work, the sat phone, the ledger pages, the Dyntech box humming faintly as if it remembered commands. Duarte listened, hands folded, eyes moving like a judge weighing a life. When he mentioned Hawkins, she flinched. It was small, but it lived. "If a witness is repurposed," she said carefully, "we need corroboration that can't be argued into smoke." Lila slid over a thumb drive. "Route tokens, a pointer labeled Anshore Bear, video of door 4, and a list of names." Her mouth tightened. They wrote him redeployed. Duarte drew a slow breath. "We've suspected a carve-out like DY-22, but suspicion is for coffee rooms. This." She touched the stack as if it might bite. "This is court." A knock. A deputy entered, snow steaming off his shoulders. "Ma'am, marshals are fielding weird traffic. Power company reports instability downtown. Grid fluctuations like someone's leaning on the switch." Duarte's gaze ticked to the window, toward the low sky and the lines that stitched city to power. "We'll move fast," she said, returning to the table. "Emergency evidentiary. Hearing. Judge Klein will see what he can be made to see." She looked at Noah. "You willing to be sworn?" "I've already been," Noah said. Different altar. They were barely seated in courtroom 3 by dusk. The benches creaked under winter coats. The flag hung still. Judge Klein entered with the tired dignity of a man who has seen most kinds of weather and decided to remain furniture anyway. He looked over the docket, looked at Duarte, then at the defense table where 2 suits arranged their faces into skepticism. "We have a storm," he said, "and you have an emergency." Duarte rose. "Your Honor, this is a motion to impound and seal evidence pending grand jury review, and to issue temporary restraining orders against Northern Interior Logistics, Dyntech holding subsidiaries, and any federal carve-outs operating under the label DY-22. The suits murmured. Klein pinched the bridge of his nose. Carve-outs. I've lived to see the day we litigate ghosts. He flicked his eyes to Noah. Mr. Raines, you're the witness? Yes, sir. Step up. Noah swore in, voice steady. Kira lay at his boots, head on paws, eyes sweeping the room. The storm pressed a palm against the windows, testing the seams. Duarte took him through the spine of the story without wasting cartilage. Ambush, cedar, Kira's rope work, the truck, the sat phone, the outpost, the anchor warehouse, Hawkins. With each fact, she placed an exhibit, and with each exhibit, the courtroom felt less like a theater and more like a room where the floor could hold weight. When she set the neural interface box on the evidence cart, a murmur passed like a draft. The defense rose. Objection, Your Honor. Foundation as to what that device is. Duarte's chin lifted a millimeter. We will lay foundation through Dr. Chen. Klein nodded. Proceed. Lila testified in sentences that landed like nails. Procurement trails, firmware hashes, the message, frost bind. She spoke tech the way a farmer names weather, not to impress, but to survive it. The defense tried a sneer about speculative cyber inferences, but Klein cut it off with a look that suggested he'd been raised by grandmothers and would brook no disrespect for useful work. Duarte slid the ledger pages into the record. And the names, Your Honor. The storm chose that moment to gutter the lights. They flickered, dimmed, came back. The bailiff glanced toward the ceiling like a prayer. Get the power company on the line, Klein told the clerk. I don't care if you have to call their mother. The defense seized the lull. Your Honor, all this alleged evidence is derivative of a break-in. The warehouse was private property leased by a logistics firm, fruit of the poisonous. The lights died. Not a flicker, a stop. The room exhaled as one organism. Emergency panels coughed up red along the baseboards. Somewhere distant, a generator tried and failed. Outside, the wind's voice got louder, the way a liar's does when the microphone cuts. A door at the back of the courtroom opened. Snow came in on boots and orders. A man in a black parka with a little too much confidence stepped into the red glow like a stage he'd booked. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a deputy. He wore his smile like an old scar. Silas Marrow removed a glove as if undressing a threat. Apologies, Judge, he said, voice mild enough to cut. Grid's a mess tonight. I thought I'd save us time. The bailiff moved, but two men in contractor grays were already in the aisles, hands near jackets, professionalism slick as oil. Klein's face didn't move. Mr. Marrow, if you take one more step, you'll learn how quickly contempt can be measured. Marrow put both hands up, each empty, palms lit red. No need for heat. I've come to help. Duarte's laugh was winter. You don't own this room. I own very little, Marrow said. I lease talent. I rent corridors. I clean up after programs too ambitious to live under their own names. He tipped his head at the exhibits. And I recycle efficiently. Noah felt Kira's body harden against his boot. Marrow's eyes landed on him and brightened like a lab result. Mr. Raines, the man who refuses to die. You're either stubborn or adaptable. DY22 likes both. DY22 eats what it can't earn, Noah said. Marrow's gaze slid to the neural interface unit. He clucked his tongue. You found one of the old toys. Dog collars for the loyal. We've improved them. He glanced at Kira. Some models resist. The bailiff's hand sat on his holster now. The contractors smiled in ways that said they'd rehearsed this posture in mirrors. The red baseboard lights cast everyone into the same color, a democracy of blood. Klein spoke like a gavel. Mr. Marrow, you have 30 seconds to leave before I teach your men about jurisdiction using an anatomy lesson. Ms. Duarte, proceed with your motion. Clerk, get me a pen that writes in the dark. Of course, Marrow said, bowing like a man doing math in his head and liking the sum. One last courtesy, then. He reached into his coat. Kira launched. She reached him before anyone remembered breath. Her body hit his thigh like a verdict, teeth bared, eyes bright with that old river light that had pulled Noah out of black water years ago. A contractor yelped and drew. Noah was already moving. Don't, he snapped, voice so flat it sounded like weather. His pistol pointed at the floor, but his eyes did not. Nobody shoots. Marrow didn't fight. He stood very, very still, hands spread, dog anchored to his leg by the authority of her jaw. Easy, Noah murmured. Kira. Her ears flicked. She released, stepped back, growled without theater. The red lights stuttered. Somewhere outside, a transformer gave up. Marrow looked down at the tooth marks in his wool with academic interest. Good girl, he said, softly, without mockery. True loyalty has to be earned, not coded. Leave, Duarte said. Now. He took one slow step back, palm still open. You can win tonight, he said to the room. You can even sign papers, but you can't prosecute a storm. Programs like DY-22 aren't crimes to be indicted. They're weather systems. You don't jail weather. You endure it or you learn to sail. Or, Noah said, you cut its power. He held Marrow's eyes until something unperformed passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or a note two instruments can both play. Then Marrow back to the doors, his men retreating with him. The heavy wood swallowed them, then thumped under the wind. Half a minute later, the lights returned in an ugly white blast that made everyone squint like waking. The heater coughed to life. A collective laugh broke and died. Nobody trusted it. Klein didn't smile. Ms. Duarte, he said evenly, your orders are granted. Impound, seal, TROs across the board. I'm assigning armed marshals to escort this evidence to a federal facility not leased to ghosts. Mr. Rains, Dr. Chen, do not leave the building without 3 bodies between you and the weather. He signed in a tight script that feared nothing but sloppiness. The clerk stamped. The sound was sweeter than choir. As the courtroom emptied, defense muttering, press sniffing for headlines that wouldn't fit on screens. Noah felt the backs of his knees go weak. He knelt so he wouldn't sway. Kira nudged his jaw with her muzzle. I'm here, he whispered into her fur. I know. They walked the corridor toward the evidence room, under a guard phalanx that felt like an apology. Duarte peeled off to brief marshals. Lila fell in beside Noah, fingers tapping restless code against her thigh. Marrow didn't come to lose, she said. He came to measure. Then let him bring a ruler, Noah said. We'll break it. They were 20 steps from the secure door when the building trembled. Not power, not wind, something closer. A hum that rose past hearing and back down again, felt more than heard. Kira froze. Her head turned toward the stairwell. A woman in an FBI windbreaker stumbled out, face pale, hand clamped to her side. Blood seeped between her fingers like a slow red glove. Help, she said in a voice that belonged to people who'd been taught not to say that. They're in the generator room. They're... A second figure poured out of the stairwell behind her. Contractor gray, pistol up, sighting over her shoulder at the world. He saw Noah, saw the marshals, and did the worst math of his life. He fired. The round should have taken the agent in the spine. It didn't. Kira moved like a decision. She shouldered the woman aside and took the bullet along the line of her ribs. The sound it made, the wet slap of metal redirected by muscle and miracle, will live a long time in Noah's skull. Everything after that happened in the quick, choreographed way of practiced crisis. The nearest marshal put the contractor into the wall with 3 steady shots. Lila caught the agent under the arms and dragged her behind the column. Duarte appeared from nowhere with gauze and orders. Noah hit his knees beside Kira and felt the world unmake itself around a wound. "Stay," he told her, fingers already pressing, his voice so calm it frightened him. "Right here, Kira, with me." She licked his wrist, eyes clear, breath quick. Blood oozed and slowed under his hands. He could smell the copper and the cleaner they used on courthouse floors and the cold that still lived in their coats. The agent blinked up at him, face bone pale. "They were going to blow the backup," she said hoarsely. "I tried." She swallowed. "I'm Emily Vale." "Emily, I'm Noah," he said without looking away from his dog. "You did good. You're still doing good. Breathe." Her eyes skittered to Kira. She chose you," he said. "So we will too." A medic team slid in like choreography with wheels and clamps. Lila's hands were steady on the pressure. Duarte snapped at a marshal. "Lock the plant. Bring me whoever breathes near a wire." Kira's breath hitched and settled. Noah felt the tremor of pain pass through her like a wave through muscle. He moved his hand to keep pressure and to let his palm rest over her heart. It was there. It stayed. The medic looked at him. "We need to move the dog." "You'll move me too," Noah said, not looking for permission. They went as a unit down the hall in a ridiculous holy procession: gurney, medkit, dog, man, woman, law. At the service elevator, the lights hiccuped again, and the medic swore like prayer. "Stairs," he said. "We've got it." Lila caught Noah's shoulder. "Go," she said. "I'll ride the evidence. Duarte will send marshals with me." He nodded. There was nothing else to do that wouldn't lie. Find where Marrow leaned on the grid. "I'm already looking," she said, eyes gone to war. The stairwell was a wind tunnel of bad air and echo. Emily Vale's breath rasped behind them. "Why?" she asked the wall more than him. "Because storms test who we are," Noah said, "and because she thinks you're worth the bullet." They reached the basement, where an improvised triage had grown out of carts and conviction. The medic slid Kira onto a table, irrigated, assessed. Through and through along the rib, no lung, lucky. "Not luck," Noah said. Her aim. He stepped back, because men step back when professionals need a square foot more gravity. He braced his hand on the cool cinder block and finally let his breath come ragged. The world narrowed to the sound of clamps, and Kira's stubborn heart insisting on its next beat. Emily Vale eased down on a chair, color crawling back into her cheeks. "I was supposed to escort a witness," she said. "The call came from my SAC. Then the route changed on the way in. I smelled it too late." "DY-22 has fingers on phones," Noah said. "We'll cut them." "They'll come for the evidence," she whispered. "They already did," Duarte said from the doorway, snow in her hair like salt. "And lost." She looked at Kira, softened in a way that would get her in trouble with no one but herself. "I'll put a deputy in a chair by that dog who won't blink." A marshal jogged in, breath clouding. "Judge signed the transport order. We move in 10. Backup gen is secured." Duarte nodded. To Noah, "You riding with us or staying with her?" He didn't pretend to consider. "With her," he said. "Send Lila with the truck. If Marrow tries to edit the story again, she'll notice the typo." Duarte's mouth quirked. "I do love a good proofreader." She left in a hurricane of competence. The medic finished the wrap and gave Noah the kind of look that men learn on ships and in battle. "Yes, it's bad. No, it won't own us." "You can talk to her now," he said. Noah stepped to the table and put his forehead to Kira's, the way he had the night by the cedar when the world decided not to keep him. Still here, he whispered. Because you decided. Her tail thumped once. Somewhere upstairs, the storm ran its knuckles along the windows again, but the lights held. He looked at Emily Vale. You owe a dog, he said. I owe a life, she answered. No difference, he said. In the loading bay, 10 minutes later, marshals rolled 2 crates into an armored truck, one humming faintly, one heavy with paper. Lila climbed in, jaw set, eyes already hunting patterns in the night. Noah watched the doors thud shut and felt that familiar mixture that men feel when they can't be in 2 places at once. Fear, trust, prayer. The truck pulled into snow that decided to be not just weather, but a test. Red and blue lights ghosted across the walls. The bay door rattled down. Noah returned to the triage room where Kira slept under drugs and duty. He pulled up a metal stool and sat. Long night, Emily said. The longest, he said, but morning's come. He rested a hand on Kira's shoulder and let the storm talk to the building. Some nights the only victory is to keep breath moving from one person to another, from dog to man, from witness to truth. This would be one of those nights. Snow learned our names that night, not the tidy legal ones trapped on ledger paper, but the short names breath makes when your throat is raw and you're still running. By the time the armored truck cleared the courthouse ramp, Anchorage was a bowl of light drowned under gray. Lila rode in the back with 2 marshals in the crates, one humming Dyne-Tech, one heavy with pages that could tilt a country. She kept a glove on the neural unit, like you'd keep a hand on a sleeping child's back. Steady, she whispered, though the box had no ears. Convoy route? She asked. North spur to the parks, then west cut, the senior marshal said. Storm doors at mile 18 if the grid goes stupid again. Grid is already stupid, Lila muttered, tapping a window. Assume eyes on us. They rolled past plow stacks and shuttered diners. The radio hissed weather, and then Almeida, one of Duarte's, cut through. Unit 1, you've got a shadow 2 blocks back. Gray Tahoe, no plates. The marshal checked his mirror. Copy. Lila opened her laptop on battery miser mode and watched a map that didn't deserve her trust. A dot a block behind them mimicked their turns like a bad punchline. She felt the tickle at the base of her skull that meant code was nearby, humming like a bee that didn't believe in flowers. DY-22 loves remote hands, she said. Expect a lane closure that wasn't there 10 minutes ago. Roger that. We'll take the Ridge Road. Ridge is worse for snow. Better for sight lines. Outside, the city thinned to warehouses, then trees. The road climbed into a switchback ribbon cut into the shoulder of the Chugach, snowbanks higher than headlights, spruce bowing under the weight. The Tahoe kept respectful distance, the way a wolf will pace you without spending calories. Lila texted Noah. Ridge route, shadow on us. The dots turned to delivered. She pictured him in a fluorescent basement with Kira's heartbeat under his hand and a medic's voice saying good or lucky or both. The truck hit mile 14 and the world changed. Snow didn't fall from the sky anymore. It blew sideways, ground up by wind into smoke. The lead marshal leaned into the glass as if that might bend physics. Visibility 3 car lengths. If we lose the shoulder, we... The radio screamed feedback. Then a flat voice. Unit 1, stop. Repeat, stop. Slide risk increased. Risk is always increased, the marshal said, foot easing off the gas. We creep. Do not, the voice began, and then the mountain spoke. It doesn't sound like thunder. It sounds like a wall finding out it's a river. The first fracture ripped across the slope to their left, a white seam unzipping stitch by stitch. Snow below it shivered, then liquefied. The marshal didn't swear. He did something worse. He went very quiet. "Hold on," he said, and put the truck into a controlled prayer. The slide came down in tears, slow at first, then with the greedy acceleration of anything that has learned it can win. It hit the road 50 yards ahead and rolled over the guard posts like bread dough swallowing raisins. "Reverse," Lila said, already bracing the crates. "Road behind?" the driver asked the mirror. The Tahoe behind them had chosen that moment to discover the limits of rear-wheel drive. It fishtailed across both lanes, blocking the retreat. Lila saw faces, contracts and cold, inside it. She didn't see weapons, but she saw men who believed in their luck. "Hold," the marshal said again, not to the slide, to his own hands. He backed them to the least wrong angle and let the avalanche pour until it decided it was bored. The radio tried again through static. Second slide predicted, "Crown fracture above mile 13. If you are between them, we are," Lila said. "Seek higher ground." The slope on the right rose like a shoulder out of the road cut. There was no higher ground that didn't involve climbing into wind with crates that weighed more than arguments. The marshal eyed the turnout 20 yards back, a plow lot shoveled clean yesterday by a man who believed in tomorrows. "We make the lot," he said. They did, barely. The Tahoe jumped forward like a surprised animal and slid into the new pile, nose first, men bailing out with that loose run people do when they've never fallen properly. Lila watched them and knew the math. Not a hit team. A follow team waiting for a hit that hadn't arrived yet, which meant the hit was for the mine. "Marrow's erasing sources," she said into the cab. "He'll bury the shaft, make it look like a mercy slide." The marshal keyed the radio. "Courthouse, this is Unit 1. Avalanche on ridge, holding in plow lot. Request additional units and a rescue call for mile 20, Old Mine Road." The radio coughed and delivered Noah's voice, rough with running. "Lila." "Here," she said. "Stay put," he said. "They're going to knock the mountain. We're 15 out." "We." Me, Kira, and an agent who refuses to die quietly. Emily Vale's voice came faint behind his. "Protocols are for days with sun." Sirens bled under the words. Lila closed her eyes for half a beat and let the cocktail of fear and faith settle where it needed to. "Copy," she said. "We'll keep the gospel." "The what?" Emily asked. "Never mind," Lila said. "Just hurry." At the courthouse loading bay, the world had learned to breathe again. The medic let Kira stand on her own, a careful test. She bore weight, rib-taped, breath deep. Noah checked her eyes and found dawn in them. "You're not cleared for heroics," the medic said. "Define heroics," Noah said, clipping the harness. Kira leaned into his leg as if to say, "Define later." Emily Vale had color back and a bandage of her own under the windbreaker. She held out keys, the Ranger unit's Tahoe. "I should be on desk after NOIS," she said, "but I'm not that kind of should." Duarte met them at the door, breath blowing white like a censure and a blessing. "Transport's holding. Klein ordered Doe T to freeze the mine road, but the state got there late. If Marrow lights that slope, he'll take out the shaft and whatever men he sent to wash the scene." "His own?" Emily said. "He likes clean margins," Duarte said. "Do what you do. Bring me the truth alive." "Copy," Noah said. They drove into weather that had decided to audition for a part it already had. The wipers worked like men on old oars. Kira stood braced, eyes forward, every motion calculated into stillness. Emily took the switchbacks clean and mean. She'd done this dance before, and the mountain could feel it. At mile 17, the scanner caught a ranger channel. Ward's men. A voice Noah didn't know said, "Charges heard above the shaft. We've got 2 deputies trapped near the outflow culvert, snow collar building." "Keep them breathing," Noah said into a mic he didn't own. "We're 3 out." "Identify," the voice snapped. "Ghost," Noah said. A pause. "Copy, Ghost." Emily didn't smile exactly, but something like it tugged at the corner of her mouth. "You have a brand." "Not that kind," Noah said. They cut left onto the mine road, which had been a road yesterday and was now a suggestion. Limbs arched under the weight into a cathedral of black lines. The sky above them was white without depth, like looking into a wound too close to see its edges. The first slide had already rewritten the grade ahead. Snow lay across it in a piled grammar of slabs and dust. A ranger truck sat skewed in the ditch, hazard lights brave and foolish. A deputy with ice in his eyebrows waved them hard left, where someone had cut steps with a shovel and a prayer. "2 down there," he said, not wasting words on greeting. "1 femur, 1 buried to chest. Culvert is breathing. If the second crown goes, it may take the whole collar." "How long?" Emily asked. "Longer than we have." Noah looped Kira's lead to his belt and took the steps down the cut. The culvert mouth below was a black oval where snow fed into the mine's old drainage. In front of it, an island of ice and logs, a ruin from last breakup, had trapped debris, and today, men. The first deputy's leg lay wrong, but his eyes were too busy living to care. The second had snow to the armpits, face gray with the precise fear that comes from not being able to lift your own ribs. "We're here," Noah said, and meant more than the grammar. He took the shovel from the ranger and went to work with a speed that wasn't frantic because frantic wastes heat. Emily slid in beside him with that federal way of doing calm. Kira ranged the edge, head high, reading the slope and the air, ears catching sounds that belonged to snow, not men. "Another slide coming," the buried deputy rasped. "Maybe," Noah said, "but this breath is yours." He cut a trench along the man's torso, using the shovel more like a spoon than a blade. Emily supported the head, gloved fingers finding the neck to talk to the carotid. The femur man gritted into a stick and then relaxed because men relax when other hands decide to carry. A low, sick roar moved through the trees above, a sound like a cough the size of a hill. Kira's ears stabbed forward. She turned and barked once, sharp as a whistle. Noah didn't look up. Looking up doesn't stop snow. "Almost," he said. They freed the chest, then the waist. The deputy's breath expanded for the first time in minutes and turned his face human again. "I thought," he started. "Later," Emily said, and meant it kindly. The slope above shook its head and let go. The second crown fracture released small at first, a slough like flour off a baker's board, and then, finding luck, decided to be bolder. The new slide charged the gully with less mass than the first, but more speed. It aimed directly for the culvert mouth, and the men knelt foolishly in front of it. "Now," Noah said, not loudly, and pulled. Emily and the ranger heaved the buried deputy onto a drag tarp they hadn't had a second to unfold properly. The femur man tried to help and realized no one wanted that. Kira leapt onto the wrong side of the tarp. Noah's no came too late, and dug her nails in, adding 50 pounds of understood traction. They hauled for the makeshift steps, boots punching through crust, snow grabbing ankles, time racing gravity, and winning by stumbles. The slide poured into the culvert with a percussive rush that thundered inside the pipe and boomed back up like a giant laughing. The collar collapsed where their knees had been 4 heartbeats earlier, and the air filled with that crystalline dust that makes everything a dream you don't want. They made the lip. Men reached down with arms like rigging and yanked them to the relative grammar of the road. Someone clapped someone, and someone cursed in thanks, and someone cried without sound. The mountain breathed out. "Count," Noah said. "2 deputies," the ranger answered, hand to each shoulder. 1 ghost, 1 fed, 1 hero. Kira shook snow off in a heavy halo that caught the failure of light. She panted, tongue bright, eyes never leaving Noah's. He scratched the good side of her ribs and found the tape still holding. "Not cleared for heroics," he murmured. She sneezed in dignified disagreement. "Where's the shaft?" Lila's voice cracked over the handheld like a person ditching a bad dream. "Noah." He keyed. "Collar flooded, culvert holding. Are you clear?" "Unit 1 in a plow lot," she said. "First slide cut the road. Tahoe boys dug themselves out. They're pretending to be hikers. I'm pretending to believe them." "Hold," Noah said. "We'll come." "No," she answered. "I'm coming to you." The decision made itself. Marshals chained tires and fetched ropes, and someone had coffee that tasted like gun oil and sugar. The ranger truck with the broken ego still ran. It would do. Emily's Tahoe would lead at 10 miles an hour because any faster was disrespect. They convoyed up the chopped steps of road to the ridge where the mine road broke into a wide shoulder the plows loved. That's where they met Hawkins. He stood in the road cut like a method that hadn't been tested yet. No rifle out. Only hands lifted, palms pale against the blue weather. Snow had found his lashes and made him look younger than the man whose body had walked into the warehouse. His eyes still held that wrong little glow like a biomedical joke that had been told too many times. "Don't shoot," he said, which is what people say when they know someone should. Marshals took positions because professionals don't need to be told. Emily set her feet the way training had taught her and put her hand just off the butt of her pistol. Kira leaned forward, hackles up, weight balanced, neither attack nor retreat, simply decision held taut. "Why?" Noah asked. The word had a dozen spare words inside it. Hawkins's mouth twitched. "Because I placed the last charge wrong," he said. "Because something in me didn't want the culvert to die when it could take men who were still moving." He looked past Noah to the tarp, to the face of the deputy now alive enough to hate the cold. "Because you came back." "What are you, Cole?" Noah said softly, finally using the first name he'd kept in a pocket, because to speak it would be to admit the hope. Hawkins tilted his head like a dog remembering a command. "I am efficient," he said. Then, lower. "And not all at once." Behind him, on the far slope, a pop answered a question no one had asked aloud. A shallow cornice dropped, sending a ribbon of snow across a side chute where no one stood. Hawkins flinched like a man who had expected a pain and not received it. "Marrow?" Emily asked. "Gone to the other ridge," Hawkins said. "He doesn't need to see blood. He only needs the ledger to drown." "The ledger is in a truck with federal seals," Lila said, arriving out of the storm like a sentence you needed to hear. She climbed out of the plow lot truck, goggles up, face bright with cold and conviction. "And in 12 places that don't care if the grid hiccups." Hawkins looked at her. For a second, the blue behind his pupils dimmed. "Dr. Chen," he said, almost like memory. "You taught me how to name variables." "I taught you how to doubt," she said. "Keep doing that." His gaze cut to Kira and steadied there. Whatever had been tuned inside the shepherd dogs hummed like wire between the two creatures. Kira didn't growl. She simply watched. Hawkins smiled with just one side of his mouth, the human way, and then took a small step back. Marrow will take door 4 to bear. Anchor, he said. He thinks in metaphors he can keep. He pointed to the horizon where the storm thickened. Warehouse by the shipyard won't hold him, but the barge will. A barge? Lila asked. Names are weather, Hawkins said. Roots are rivers. He'll move on water to wash prints. A marshal raised his hand like a student who had not signed up for poetry. We cuff him or what? Noah weighed the air. The part of him that believed in rules stretched one way. The part that had learned mercy in a river mouth pulled the other. Before he chose, Hawkins chose for him. He slid his hands down, slowly, and held them out wrists together like a man offering a fact. Take me, he said, but put me where Dynetech can't whisper through the walls. Lila stepped in, eyes narrow. He's hot, she told the marshals. EMP-proofed mesh for transport, and keep his hands visible. DY-22's toys like finger talk. They walked him to the truck and Kira walked behind, head even with his knee. Once, Hawkins glanced down at her and said, barely moving his lips, Good girl. She sneezed again, the polite Malinois insult. The radio flared. Duarte, storm window closing. If you've got bodies and brains, get them where paper lives. Judge is awake and mean. I like him that way. On our way, Lila said. They turned the convoy. The mountain had stopped trying to teach them and went back to being tall. Noah took the last glance down the draw where the shaft lay under new snow. The mine had been an open mouth. Now it was a scar. But scars tell better truths than wounds. On the way down, the Tahoe from earlier reappeared, this time honest in its need to pass. 2 men inside held their hands up in exaggerated innocence as they slid by. One of them, the squeak parka from the yard, let his eyes dwell too long on the crate edges visible through Lila's truck door. He filed a thought he would not live to use if he stayed in this job. Door 4, Lila said to no one. Bear, anchor, barge. Tomorrow, Noah said. Tonight, she corrected, watching the storm. Kira laid her head on Noah's thigh and finally let exhaustion admit itself. He stroked the line of fur avoiding tape and felt a steady, stubborn beat under his hand. Avalanche gospel. Everything false falls. What remains is what can carry weight. They reached the courthouse as lights failed, and returned, and failed, and returned, like a man learning to forgive. Marshals hustled Hawkins through a door that had learned too many secrets. The deputies went to a clinic with hands on shoulders and the kind of laughter you hear at funerals right after the hymn. Emily Vale filled out a form that would birth 5 investigations and kill 3 careers. She signed without shaking. Duarte stood at the base of the stair like a conductor who has, at last, the right orchestra. You brought me evidence, a witness and living people, she said. You may keep your jobs. We don't have jobs, Lila said. Then keep your hands, Duarte replied. I'll need them. Noah looked toward the windows where the city tried to be brave. He thought about water and routes and barge schedules and a man who still called him brother from behind blue-lit eyes. He thought about Marrow and anchors and the way storms love to hide in metaphors. Door 4, he said. Blue lift, Lila answered. Barge, Emily added. Gospel, Duarte said dryly, and for once didn't sound like she was making fun. Kira sneezed a final judgment on bureaucracy and curled at Noah's boots, finally asleep. The mountain had preached. The city would answer. Morning, if it came, would have to learn their names. Anchorage's shipyard wore the storm like a borrowed coat. Sodium lamps smeared halos in the blowing snow, and the cranes stood like iron clerics blessing the harbor with rusted hands. The signs Lila had been collecting, the ones that felt like metaphors until they weren't, stacked into a single arrow. Door 4, blue lift, barge. Bear anchor. Emily read off the peeling stencil on the chain link as they reached the perimeter. He really did name the hiding place after a riddle. Criminals are romantics with invoices, Lila said, shouldering her pack. He thinks poetry keeps him safe. Kira nudged Noah's knee, breath warm through the frost. She wasn't cleared for heroics. She came anyway. They moved along the fence where sea ice bucked against the pilings. Door 4 faced the water, a corroded rolling bay with a dent like a fist had tried to reason with it. Beside it, the blue freight lift shook in the wind, its cage dusted white, a frozen tongue of metal licking at the second floor. Up or through? Emily asked. Through, Noah said, working the rolling door's latch with gloved patience. The storm hissed disapproval. Metal squealed. Inside, the warehouse smelled like brine and ink. Pallets of drums sat in long aisles, each stamped with shipping codes that meant everything and nothing. Fertilizer if you squinted, rare earth if you knew how to read the lie. Footfalls above, a radio cracking orders. 10 minutes, push with tide. Marrow will join on the slip. Barge window, Lila whispered. He'll ride the ebb to the outer bay, then transfer to a pilot skiff. Clean water, clean books. Kira's ears slashed forward. She trotted toward a stair scabbed with salt. Noah followed, hand on the rail, ribs still remembering last night's court. On the mezzanine, a door stood open to the gale. Through it, a catwalk ran to the blue lift and across to a loading arm that arched over the barge below, like a bridge to a story you shouldn't cross. Silas Marrow stood at the far end, coat flapping, gloves exact. He wasn't alone. 2 contractors at his flanks, one on a winch, another at a mooring line. His breath smoked, dignified. Marrow saw them and smiled as if he'd been waiting at a restaurant table and they were late. Mr. Rains, Dr. Chen, Agent Vale. The ghost brings friends. Friends bring warrants, Emily said, stepping into the wind. He glanced past them. No judge on the catwalk tonight. Duarte signed enough paper to pulp a forest, Lila said. You can quote it on your way down the ladder. Marrow's eyes warmed, not with kindness, but with interest. You mistake my destination. I'm going up the channel. He gestured to the barge, to the containers chained like safe deposit boxes the size of rooms. Evidence sinks, evidence sails, evidence evaporates when weather is persuasive. Your weather keeps killing people, Noah said. Not people, Marrow corrected gently. Outcomes, a necessary distinction in my field. Kira's growl arrived low and unperformed. It made the storm feel uninvited. Bring him back from the metaphor, Lila told Noah, eyes scanning, counting exits, clocks, mistakes. We need the body and the ledger intersecting in court, not in the bay. Noah stepped to the rail. You had a chance, he told Marrow. Walk away from ghosts. Let the names stay names. Marrow's smile thinned. We don't get to walk away. We only decide which corridor eats us. He tipped his chin toward the loading arm. Door 4 will be closed soon. Would you like to watch me win? Not tonight, a voice said from behind them. Hawkins. He moved out of the shadow of a stacking frame, with 2 marshals at his shoulders, like very polite wolves. They looked almost surprised he had asked to come, and more surprised that every step he took was one he didn't have to. His hands were cuffed in front. The blue behind his eyes had dimmed to a pilot light. Marrow's smile brightened again. Cole, Did you bring me your confession? I brought you the thing that broke, Hawkins said. His gaze flicked to the loading arm controls, a box wired to the lift with a harness of cables, frost beaded on the buttons. You set your safeties wrong. Marrow spared the control box a glance full of contempt for imprecision. I hired men who could read weather. I did not hire poets. Poets notice hinges, Hawkins said softly. He stepped toward the box. The marshal stiffened. Noah lifted a palm. Wait. Kira's head tracked Hawkins's shoulders like a compass under a magnet. Hawkins didn't touch the panel. He pointed. You chained the secondary clutch to a manual override because the motor was binding. But your man looped the chain wrong. He flicked his eyes to the winch. If that chain slips when you load the forward container, the arm drops and torsions the lift. The cage will jam. If you're on it, you'll hang over the water, like an idea you didn't think through. For the first time, a precise, small line appeared between Marrow's brows. He looked at the chain. He looked back at Hawkins. And you're telling me this because... Hawkins breathed, and the exhale looked like a man remembering the shape his lungs were born to have. Because something in me is still inefficient. Lila's mouth quirked, grief and gratitude in the same muscle. Welcome back. Marrow's smile left. He lifted a hand. The winchman tightened the line. The barge drifted a foot, groaned against the fenders, tired and mean. We're past talk, Marrow said. Then let's move, Emily answered, because action is a language. Everything happened at once and in sequence, the way good endings do when the story has trained your eyes. A contractor reached inside his coat. A marshal's voice said, "Don't," at the exact same pitch Noah had used the night before. Kira launched, not at a man, but at the chain Marrow had mocked. Her jaws clamped on a loop that should never have been within a dog's height, and she yanked. Metal squealed. The loop skipped a tooth on the sprocket and bit into the right link instead of the wrong. The loading arm shuddered. The lift cage lurched half an inch, then caught true. Marrow blinked, annoyed at physics becoming opinionated. Now, Noah said, and ran. He didn't go for Marrow. He went for the cutoff, the red lever by the lift's base that would starve the motor of power and the arm of obedience. He hit it with the heel of his hand. The motor died into a hungry whine. The contractor finally found his courage and his gun. Emily found his wrist with a baton strike that turned his shot into a scream at the wind. A marshal cuffed him mid-profanity. The winchman looked to Marrow for orders and saw none. He ran and learned how catwalks punish hurry. Marrow didn't flee. He stepped forward instead, toward the barge edge, and rested his hand on the rail like a man greeting a friend. You can freeze pieces, he told Noah, as if resuming a pleasant conversation. You can embarrass evenings, but you cannot change the weather. DY-22 will not be tried in a room on a hill. It will be tried in 1,000 rooms you don't know exist. You built a maze, Noah said. We brought a dog. Kira held the chain until her jaw trembled, then released, tongue bright, eyes laughing at gravity. Hawkins moved without being told. He stepped to the control box and pulled the manual pins. The loading arm sighed and locked. For an instant, his face was all human. Marrow saw it. The slackening of the blue. He cocked his head, almost tender. You're breaking, Cole. Hawkins met his gaze. I'm choosing. Marrow's hand came up, a little remote, no bigger than a matchbox. One note, he said. For old times. He clicked. Nothing. Lila smiled like a storm bit its own tongue. We pulled your RF board out of the Dyne-Tech unit at court, she said. You can't sing to your toys tonight. Marrow's teeth flashed in something very far from mirth. Then we'll play an older song. He moved fast for a man who believed in philosophy. He vaulted the rail to the barge and sprinted for the shoreward end where a pilot skiff was moored like an exit clause. Noah followed, boots slapping iron, breath tearing white ribbons into the gale. Emily's footfalls matched his. Kira hit the barge with a thump that rang the hull and made gulls lift cursing into the night. The skiff's engine coughed as Marrow yanked its starter. Twice. 3 times. He muttered a word that did not belong on a resume. On the 4th, it caught. The bow line skittered off the cleat. Noah didn't jump to the skiff. He jumped to the rope, 2 hands, all his weight, and let it yank his shoulder into a white flare of old pain. He flipped the line around the post and sat with it like a bad friend who needed hugging. The skiff jerked and stopped, engine snarling, Marrow pivoting to slash the rope with a knife that had folded more letters than bread. A baton struck his wrist before the knife found the right angle. Emily again, federal and furious. The knife skidded under the skiff seat. Marrow backhanded her with the other hand and moved for the throttle. He forgot about the dog. Kira hit him center mass. They went down in a tangle that was not metaphoric at all. Noah climbed into the skiff and took the throttle away the way you take scissors from a stubborn child. He stepped on the kill lanyard. The engine went dumb. Emily leaned on Marrow's shoulder, with all the professional boredom in the world, while she recited rites he had heard before and never believed applied to him. On the catwalk, marshals were already moving men and metal into positions that would later sound like logistics, but were, in the moment, a choir. Lila appeared at the rail, cheeks striped red by cold, eyes bright with the knowledge that code and bone had teamed up and chosen to be better than their inputs. Hawkins stood by the control box with his cuffed hands at his chest and the exact posture of a man who has decided which way gravity falls. He looked at Noah and smiled without showing teeth. Noah nodded once. Everything inside him that had been braced since the cedar loosened 1 notch. There wasn't much poetry in the hours that followed. Marshals did marshalling, paperwork got stapled to other paperwork until the pile weighed enough to count as law, and a federal cage opened its door to Silas Marrow with the practical dignity of public steel. In courtroom 3 the next morning, Judge Klein drank coffee, like it might fend off the cold forever. Duarte moved through the calendar like a woman getting the dishes done so she could sit with someone she loved in a quiet kitchen. When Marrow's case was called, the room did that thing rooms do when everyone knows they are looking at something larger than its parts and agrees to pretend they aren't. Duarte outlined the spine in a voice that didn't ask permission. The mine, the warehouse, the sat phone routes, the neural unit, the ledger of names, the attempted erasure on the ridge, the barge. She didn't add adjectives. Truth had enough weight. Lila testified with the calm of a woman who had slept 2 hours and remembered that bread and water existed. She talked about hashes and tokens and missing packets with the clarity of a bell. Emily described a chain blown sideways, a hallway bleeding, a dog choosing to be bullet and bandage. The court reporter typed Kira with a capital K and didn't stop to wonder if dogs require honorifics. Hawkins took the stand last. Duarte didn't rush him. The blue behind his eyes was a tide now, moving but not in charge. He told the judge who had signed his paycheck when no one was supposed to, and which rooms had laughed when the word repurpose was used like a blessing. He told them how loyalty had been trained to be a lever, and how it had failed one night on a catwalk because a chain slipped and a dog sneezed and a man he remembered had said his name like it still belonged to him. Silence held the room when he finished, the useful kind, the kind that lets nails bite wood. Klein's pen ticked. He looked at Marrow. "You don't get to sail out of this one," he said. "Motion to detain is granted. We'll see your weather in open sky." The gavel sounded like a door being told what to do. A month later, because even miracles have paperwork, Noah stood on a different ridge watching a different kind of work. The sign over the chain link was plain and exactly right. North Star Canine Rescue. Below the letters, a painted star, a shepherd head silhouette, and a motto Lila insisted on: "Find the way, bring them home." Kira trotted across the yard with a limp that had downgraded itself to a memory. She wore a bright training vest and a look that said she was teaching a class she'd written. Beside her, a young vet named Danny ran a search lane with Luna, a sable shepherd with grief in her eyes and joy trying hard to catch up. Emily stood by the fence with a paper cup and the proud, bewildered look of someone who had discovered she liked Saturdays. Hawkins sat on a bench near the gate, hands free, scars honest. The blue was gone now. Consent had pushed it out. He checked in with his handler twice an hour and checked in with his own conscience more often. He wore a bracelet with an emergency number and a smile that looked like a man learning to understand the weather in his chest. Lila came out of the office carrying 2 mugs and a stack of intake forms. "We have a wait list," she said, sounding like a person who had decided to forgive the world for being complicated. Also, the grant came through. Duarte bullied a foundation and claimed it was networking. Noah took a mug and smiled into the steam. "Remind me to send her flowers she'll pretend to hate." "Already did," Lila said. She replied with a subpoena and a thank you. They watched Kira flag a scent, dig, freeze, and stare at Danny until he laughed and rewarded Luna for the find. The wind carried the clean smell of snow and sawdust and dogs. For the first time since the mountain, Noah's shoulders rested all the way down. "You ever think about after?" Lila asked, quiet enough the wind wouldn't overhear. "I used to not," he said. "Now I do. And after looks like this." He nodded at Kira, at Luna, at the yard, at Hawkins watching a dog teach a man to breathe. "This is the room that's bigger than its parts." A raven crossed the sky, black on white, voice like a hinge. It sounded less like a lock and more like a door. Noah went down to the far gate and followed the trail under the spruces to the small clearing where the training field ended and the woods began. There, half buried in snow, stood a plaque he'd carved himself with hands that still shook sometimes, for the ones who find their way back and the ones who wait with a light. Kira joined him, leaned against his leg. He put his palm on the warm, stubborn line of her ribs and closed his eyes. He had been tied to a tree once and asked to let go. He hadn't. A dog had refused to let him. "Still here," he whispered to her, to the wind, to the men under the snow and the names on the ledger, and the judge who liked his coffee too strong. "Because you decided." Her tail thumped once. The sound was small. It was enough. The sun worked at the clouds, and a thin, honest blue opened between them. The kind of blue that remembers rivers know their way, that storms don't last, that the North Star doesn't shout. It just keeps being where it is so tired people can aim. Noah breathed. The breath stayed. Some stories need thunder. This one had snow and a dog and a quiet that finally didn't hurt. He let it be quiet. Some stories don't end. They simply find a quieter road. If this one reached you, if you felt the snow, the storm, and the heartbeat that refused to stop, then don't let it disappear. Subscribe to the North Star Stories, where every week we follow another light in the dark. Hit that bell Share it with someone who still believes in loyalty, in hope, in the sound of a dog finding home. Because somewhere out there, another story is waiting to be found.